Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Lucas returned to his remote mountain cabin, he expected peace. Instead, he found warning signs, forged documents, and a plot to steal his land. What began as suspicion unraveled into a dark conspiracy of power, fraud, and a war over who truly owns the ground beneath their feet. I knew something was wrong the second my truck rounded the final curve and the tree line opened up to my cabin. It wasn't the kind of wrong you feel when you forget to turn off the stove or leave your wallet at home. This was the kind of wrong that crawls up your spine and makes your gut clench. My cabin, my 6-acre slice of Colorado peace, looked like a crime scene. Yellow signs flapped in the late summer breeze. Not mine. Not the familiar no trespassing markers I'd nailed up every 100 feet like clockwork. These were new, big, cheap vinyl banners screaming in hazard orange. Danger, abandoned structure, stay out, property under review. I pulled up slowly, engine idling, eyes scanning everything. The first sign was zip-tied to my gate. Another was staked into the dirt right off the gravel drive, angled for maximum visibility from the private road. And dead center on the front door of the cabin, my cabin, was a laminated sheet with the Deerwood Ridge HOA logo and a stamped warning. This structure is deemed unsafe and will be subject to removal under Article 9, Section 5. Below it, confident marker, deadline September 15th. I shut off the engine and climbed out, feeling the high-altitude chill despite the sun. My boots hit the gravel harder than usual. I'd only been gone for 8 weeks. A contract job in Arizona. Bridge surveying, routine, lucrative. I've left the cabin for longer before. Never, not once, has anything like this happened. First thing I did was check the door, still locked, deadbolt intact. Good. Then I looked up at the eave, where the primary camera used to sit. Gone. The little bracket hung there like a broken finger. I pulled out my phone, tapped into the satellite-linked system. Offline, entire cabin interface wiped. No pings, no feeds, no logs. The perimeter signs I'd installed last year, the ones that said private property, armed monitoring in place, had been taken down. The metal posts were still in the ground, bent. Someone had actually yanked them out with force, probably a winch or crowbar. I walked the perimeter slowly, checking damage. On the north side of the lot near the ridge, I found a pile of wooden stakes wrapped with pink construction ribbon. Survey markers. Brand new. Unauthorized. Back at the porch, I scanned the laminated notice. It was signed by Karen Stanford, acting president of the Deerwood Ridge HOA. I'd never heard of her. Last I checked, the HOA board barely acknowledged my existence, and for good reason. My property was never part of the HOA. It predates their existence by more than 40 years and sits on land that's held in a family trust, with a permanent servitude recorded in the county deed office. They had no claim here. That didn't stop them from trying, apparently. A slow rage started to simmer as I walked around the cabin. No signs of break-in, thankfully, but someone had been here, recently. The brush was trampled. A discarded coffee cup lay near the fire pit. I took photos of everything, time-stamped, geotagged. Then I opened the utility shed and flipped the main breaker. The interior control panel flickered to life. Password prompt, not mine. Someone had reset my satellite router, deliberately. I didn't call the HOA. I called the sheriff. It took about 40 minutes for Deputy Ralston to arrive. Good guy. I've known him from back when I was renovating the place 5 years ago. He parked behind my truck, stepped out with his hand already on his notepad. "What in God's name is all this?" he asked, glancing at the signs. "You tell me," I said, handing him the laminated HOA notice. He read it slowly, brows tightening. "You're not part of Deerwood Ridge." "Never have been," I replied. "And they know it. They've known it for decades." Ralston made a low whistle and started taking photos of his own. I showed him the missing camera bracket, the reset control panel, the damaged signposts, the construction markers. He shook his head more than once. "I'm writing this up as suspected trespass and tampering," he said. "You'll want to talk to the county clerk and your lawyer. This is starting to stink like attempted property reassignment." I nodded. I already had someone in mind. But before that, I walked next door, if you could call it that. Old Man Jerry's cabin sat about half a mile west along the trail, one of the few other properties not swallowed by Deerwood Ridge's upscale expansion. He was sitting on his porch with a telescope and a beer when I arrived. He waved me over. "I figured you'd be back soon." "You see all this?" I asked, gesturing vaguely toward the forest. I saw more than I wanted to, Jerry muttered, setting his beer down. Bunch of clipboard people came by 2 weeks ago. HOA types, lady in designer hiking boots and mirrored sunglasses leading the charge. Said they were evaluating dangerous structures. I told them it wasn't their land. They said, "Not for long. I should have called you." "You should have punched someone," I muttered. Jerry snorted. "Would've. But they brought a deputy that time. Real friendly with the blonde. Karen." I thanked Jerry, promised to keep him in the loop, then drove straight back to the cabin and started backing up everything I could find onto an external drive. Photos, documents, old satellite logs. The signs were just the beginning. I could feel it, and I don't get blindsided twice. The next morning, I drove into the county seat, coffee in hand, jaw set tight, documents in my passenger seat. My first stop was the Land Records Division. I walked in, gave my name, and requested a full printout of any changes, filings, or annotations associated with my parcel number. The clerk, a young guy named Miguel with tired eyes and a university hoodie, typed in the numbers and frowned almost instantly. "There's a weird flag here," he muttered. "Hold on." He tapped a few more keys and turned the monitor slightly toward me. "See this?" He pointed at a line highlighted in yellow. "That's a temporary status override, filed 2 weeks ago. Expired after 48 hours, but it triggered a review note. Says under community jurisdiction pending verification of abandonment claim." "Community jurisdiction?" I asked, already feeling my blood pressure tick up. "Yeah," he said. "Says it was filed by a clerk on behalf of the Deerwood Ridge HOA. "That's illegal," I replied. "My property isn't in their HOA. Never has been. I have the deed." "Hey man, I just print the records," Miguel said, holding up his hands. I asked who filed it. The system showed a digital signature, J. Reynolds, with internal access credentials. I asked Miguel who that was. "Reynolds," he said, checking another terminal. "That'd be Jordan Reynolds, one of the junior clerks. Doesn't usually file land status changes without supervisory approval." I took a slow breath. Karen Stanford had mentioned her brother-in-law was helpful in permitting. Guess I just found out what that meant. I got my printed copies, receipts, timestamps. Then I called Sheila Kent. Sheila had been my land use attorney ever since I started dealing with this cabin. Ex-military herself, now specializing in rural property law, boundary disputes, and HOA overreach cases. She picked up on the second ring. "Talk," she said. "I've got a possible illegal filing on my title. HOA tried to override land status while I was out of state. Clerk named Reynolds." She was silent for a beat. "Meet me at the firm. Bring everything." By noon, I was in Sheila's glass-walled office downtown, watching her flip through the paperwork like she was reading a murder confession. "They filed under Rule 12B, she said. Statute from the 1980s that allows community entities to request temporary custodianship of land for public safety reasons, but only if the land is officially unclaimed, has no recent activity, or is tax delinquent. I paid my taxes 6 months ago." "I know," she said. "This was a fishing expedition. They filed a fake abandonment claim hoping the system would auto-flag your property. Then they used the flag to justify printing those signs." I showed her the photos, the gate, the laminated warnings, the missing cameras. "Vandalism, impersonation of authority, digital intrusion, and trespassing," she said, jotting notes. "We can make a case, but I need more. Was anyone else on site?" "Yeah, a neighbor saw them. Took names." She nodded. "Good. And the guy who filed it?" "Karen's brother-in-law. Land clerk." She looked up. This could be criminal, Lucas." I leaned back, the tension in my chest not loosening yet. "Yeah, I know." "First thing," she said, "we need to file a formal complaint with the county recorder and land use commission. That'll freeze any further status changes. Then we issue a cease and desist to the HOA and its president. Make it legally binding. If they touch anything again, we can escalate." I signed the complaint paperwork, handed over my backups, and left her office with a tight fist in my stomach. I thought it'd feel better, taking action. It didn't. Back at the cabin, I dug out the locked case I kept in the utility closet. Inside, a new trail camera system, offline DVR, battery backups, and motion sensors. If they were going to come again, I'd be ready. I spent the rest of the day rewiring the exterior, installed new cams under the eaves, tree-mounted one aimed down the road, and set up real-time alerts to my phone. Then I checked my email. There it was, a PDF attachment from an anonymous Gmail address. Subject line, HOA communication packet. FYI, the file was a scanned internal HOA memo. The Deerwood Ridge Board had circulated it just last week. I scrolled through it, my heart pounding. Structure located at Parcel 684C appears unmaintained, unsupervised, and unoccupied for over 60 days. The board recommends preemptive action to ensure community aesthetics and safety. Recommended path: temporary signage, filing of abandonment claim, and hiring of external contractor to evaluate demolition feasibility. See attached projected reclamation budget. I stared at the name beneath it. Karen Stanford, President. Signed in thick black ink. I don't remember how long I sat there staring, but I do remember the last page. An invoice draft to Sierra Ridge Demo Services for an initial consultation and removal prep. Estimated start September 25th. They were planning to demolish my cabin, and they'd already hired someone to do it. I didn't sleep much that night. Every shadow on the tree line looked like headlights. Every breeze felt like it was trying to whisper warnings through the cracks in the window panes. At 3 in the morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a black coffee, staring at the glowing DVR feed on my laptop. All 4 new cameras were working. No movement, no intrusions. For now. By 9 a.m., I was in touch with a private investigator. His name was Dean Hayes, ex-Navy former insurance fraud analyst, now freelance with a specialty in HOA corruption and real estate manipulation. Sheila had worked with him before and swore he had a sixth sense for tracing buried motives and falsified filings. Dean showed up that afternoon in a beat-up Chevy Suburban with Utah plates and the demeanor of a man who once interrogated people by handing them their own birth certificate. No small talk, just a nod, a notepad, and a tactical vest under a flannel. We went over everything in my cabin: the notice, the satellite wipe, the memo, the contractor invoice, the name J. Reynolds. He asked for access to all my surveillance backups, even the corrupted logs, and made a local copy onto his drive. "I'll start with the clerk," he said. "If he used internal tools to flag your land, there'll be an access log in the county system. Even if he wiped it, we can triangulate the activity window." I nodded. Karen thinks she's clever. Karen thinks she's safe because most people roll over and let HOAs do what they want, he replied. But she's not dealing with a retiree who forgets to read the fine print. She picked the wrong hill to die on. That evening, Dean called. He was already back at his office scrubbing metadata. "You were right," he said. "The temporary jurisdiction flag on your property was filed using admin-level override credentials. Reynolds didn't just submit a form. He logged into the internal portal using an elevated access key, not something junior clerks usually have. I ran a cross-match of account activity. That same key was used to file 3 other requests for property abandonment review in the last 6 months, all adjacent to Deerwood Ridge." "Let me guess," I said. "All private parcels?" "Bingo. I've got names. All 3 filed, flagged, then withdrawn after the owners came back or caught wind. Yours is the first where they tried to move to demolition." "What about the contractor?" I asked. "Company's real," Dean replied. "Small outfit out of Telluride. But they're not demo experts. They do mountain site recovery and landscape clearing. The kicker? Their business license lists a silent co-owner, Delaney Stanford, Karen's husband." Of course, Dean also found an email thread forwarded by a whistleblower, some poor soul on the HOA board who clearly had a conscience. In it, Karen wrote, "If we get 1 more week without interference, we can proceed with Phase 1 cleanup. The community expects progress. This property has been an eyesore for years. The legal risk is manageable." She attached a photo of my cabin taken from the ridge, circled in red, labeled Target Area A. I sent it straight to Sheila. Within the hour, she filed a motion for emergency injunctive relief with the county civil court. The paperwork requested a temporary restraining order on any actions by Deerwood Ridge HOA or associated contractors, a subpoena for digital logs from the Land Registry Access Portal, a preservation order on all demolition-related communications involving HOA board members, but we weren't done. The next morning, I drove to the regional planning office. I requested a formal copy of the land use map. The clerk was kind enough to print the latest topographic overlay. My parcel was clearly marked, in bold gray, as outside HOA jurisdiction. Except someone had scribbled, in pen across the margin, "Pending review for annexation, see case ref, DWR 12B. I stared at the ink. "This isn't official," the clerk said, frowning. This map isn't supposed to be annotated. Who gave this to you?" I turned the paper around. In the corner was a redacted print footer, DWR12B.PDF. She checked her system. There was no case filed under that number. "It's not in the system," she said. It's just a placeholder." "But placeholders don't show up in the public repository unless someone uploads them." Dean confirmed it hours later. The map was doctored, uploaded to a sandbox folder on the portal by an employee with shared HOA logins. That employee, another relative of Karen Stanford, her niece, interning part-time. They were building a full ecosystem of forgery. And the scariest part? It almost worked. Sheila called that evening. The judge approved the temporary injunction, she said. "Nothing gets touched now, legally. But Lucas, we need to prepare for escalation. These people aren't amateurs. They're running a soft version of a reclamation scheme. And they've done it before." I sat on my porch that night, looking over the ridge, watching the clouds turn red against the mountains. I thought about the signs, the demolition budget, the doctored maps, the fake emails. Karen had gotten bold, but now she was sloppy, and I had proof. 3 days later, just as I was starting to think the injunction might actually hold them back, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the northeast perimeter camera. It was early, barely 6:30 in the morning, and the mountain air outside my cabin still hung thick with mist. I grabbed the tablet and pulled up the feed. 2 SUVs were idling just off the gravel turn-in behind the HOA's old clubhouse. From the angle, I could see men unloading equipment, vests, tool bags, what looked like a clipboard. A third vehicle, an unmarked white van, rolled up minutes later. That one made my stomach sink. On the side of the van, in cheap magnetic signage, it read, "Rocky Mountain Fire Risk Inspection Unit." I stepped outside, boots crunching the gravel, and hit record on my phone. As I walked down toward the gate, a man in a red jacket with a department badge stepped out, flanked by another in plain clothes and, predictably, Karen Stanford herself, arms crossed, aviators on, smug as ever. "Can I help you?" I asked, as calm as I could muster. The fire inspector stepped forward. "We received a community complaint regarding unregistered hazardous materials on site, specifically unpermitted propane storage, reports of unauthorized occupancy, and general fire code violations." "Did you receive that complaint directly from the property owner?" He hesitated. Karen stepped in. As acting HOA president, I submitted the concern on behalf of the community. And under county code, fire inspection teams are authorized to evaluate imminent hazards. "You do realize I have a court-issued injunction against you," I said to her directly. She smiled. "This is a public safety inspection, Lucas, not HOA enforcement." The man in plain clothes, someone from the sheriff's office, judging by his badge chain, stepped forward and held up a form. "This is a field access order, not a warrant," I said, scanning it. "And I'm telling you now, any step past that gate is trespassing." He shrugged. "We're just here to observe. Inspector leads." I held up my phone camera, panned it across their faces. "Then, you can observe this. I'm officially stating that none of you have legal permission to enter this property. And if you attempt to, I'll have you cited under the protective injunction currently in place." I turned to the fire inspector. "Do you have cause to believe there's an active fire hazard here?" "Well, the propane tanks are fully permitted," I cut in, "and documented with the county fire marshal's office. I can email the approval in 5 minutes." Karen opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "Don't say another word. You're not in charge of this land. You never were." The standoff lasted another 10 minutes. Eventually, after I handed over PDF copies of all permits via tablet, the inspector backed down. The sheriff's deputy pulled Karen aside, whispered something, and they retreated toward their vehicles. As they walked off, I caught part of the conversation. "He has cameras," the deputy said. "And a goddamn lawyer." Karen's face twisted, but she said nothing. As soon as they left, I called Sheila. She was already prepping documents. "They violated the injunction," she said, cold and focused. "Even showing up in an official capacity without notifying the court is enough for us to file for enforcement penalties. And if the HOA coordinated this with the fire inspector, that's grounds for conspiracy." That afternoon, Dean emailed me again. He'd been digging further into the contractor scheduled to perform the demolition. Not only was the company partially owned by Karen's husband, but the project proposal itself had been quietly reworded since our last copy. The new file listed the cabin as community lot pending transfer and used language like preemptive clearing for resident safety. More damning, the date stamp showed it had been modified after the injunction went into effect. "They're still moving forward," Dean wrote. "Just quieter now." I didn't want quiet, I wanted daylight. So I uploaded everything: the footage of the attempted inspection, the email logs, the fake parcel map, and the updated demo proposal to a public post titled, "My cabin was declared abandoned by a HOA I don't belong to. Here's how they tried to steal it." Within 24 hours, it hit the front page of Reddit. Within 48, I had a call from a local Denver news station asking for an interview. By the end of the week, the county courthouse was swamped with calls from other landowners asking how to protect themselves from involuntary HOA annexation. Karen, it seemed, had overplayed her hand, and now everyone was watching. I thought things would quiet down after the Reddit post exploded, but the exact opposite happened. 2 days later, I got a call from my neighbor Tom across the ridge. He sounded rattled. "Lucas, I just saw 2 guys in reflective vests walking your property line. They had clipboards. One of them was pointing toward your shed. I don't think they knew I was watching. I jumped in my truck and drove straight up the hill." The air felt thicker than usual, the silence broken only by the crunch of tires on gravel. When I reached the southern perimeter, sure enough, fresh boot tracks ran parallel to the tree line. Not mine. I pulled the footage from my secondary trail cams. The 2 men had been walking slowly, taking photos. One of them crouched near the survey stake I'd placed myself, the one that clearly marked the edge of my 6-acre tract. They weren't lost. They were measuring. Later that night, Dean called with an update. His contact in the county recorder's office had flagged a suspicious internal request, a zoning review filed under the name Deerwood Ridge HOA, requesting a reclassification of vacant and unmonitored structures within fire-prone zones adjacent to community property. The address block? It included my cabin. The document cited recent abandonment, unclaimed structures, and, most telling, community claim via dormant title provision. "Dormant title?" I asked. "It's obscure," Dean said. "Rarely used. But if a property appears unused for a statutory period and nobody contests it, HOAs in certain counties can attempt to initiate provisional control, especially if it seems to be a public nuisance." "My cabin isn't a nuisance," I growled. "No," he agreed, "but to the county, if they flood the office with complaints and claim nobody lives there, you can get a temporary lien placed. It starts as an administrative action." It clicked. That was her new play. Not brute force. Bureaucracy. Death by paperwork. She knew the court order protected against direct demolition, so now she was creating a paper trail, enough to trick the system into assuming the property was abandoned by default. Once it's listed as a dormant asset, the HOA could file for administrative stewardship until an owner came forward, and she'd already tried to claim I was deceased. "She's building the fiction," I said. "Yep," Dean confirmed. "A paper ghost town, and she's hoping no one looks too closely." I needed to be louder. That week, I reached out to a local land rights nonprofit called West Range Watchdogs. They'd seen similar cases, usually in older rural communities being swallowed up by suburban developments. The director, a sharp former journalist named Denise Caldwell, offered to help me amplify the story. She'd covered land grab scams before and smelled blood the minute I sent her the documents. She connected me with the Civil Liberties podcast, and I gave them a full interview, laying out the fake signage, the surveillance tampering, the phantom fire inspection, the doctored maps. I didn't hold back. Meanwhile, Dean drafted a cease and desist to the HOA's legal team demanding they retract the zoning application, but before we could even serve it, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a notice. A letter. Certified. From the Deerwood Ridge Community Oversight Committee. It read, "Effective immediately and pursuant to Section 18(b) of the Deerwood Community Preservation Mandate, your structure at Parcel 976A shall be listed as in violation of emergency safety protocols. Unless immediate remediation or demolition is initiated, the HOA reserves the right to act in the community's best interest." She had renamed the HOA Enforcement Wing to Oversight Committee. Clever. A workaround to bypass the restraining order against HOA enforcement itself. Same wolf, new wool. Dean, fuming, filed a motion to hold them in contempt of court. Sheila started drafting a fraud complaint to the state licensing board, citing coordinated misuse of administrative law. But the last nail came the next morning. A notice had been posted on the edge of my drive. Neon pink this time. Attention! Unclaimed hazard structure. Scheduled for review by code enforcement date. September 17th agency. Community Oversight Unit. In partnership with local zoning authority. Karen was no longer hiding. She was reinventing the system around my cabin. I stood there, under the pines, holding that pink sheet. The wind rustling through the trees. The camera on my chest blinking red. That's when I knew. This wasn't about a cabin anymore. This was a war over who gets to define ownership. And I was going to win it. Not just for me. I didn't sleep much after that pink notice. Something in the wording felt off, like it wasn't just another HOA stunt. In partnership with local zoning authority. That suggested she wasn't working alone anymore. The next morning, I went straight to the county zoning office. I wanted to look someone in the eye. The front desk clerk was polite enough until I asked about the Community Oversight Unit. Her smile tightened. "That's not a recognized department," she said. I blinked. "You mean it doesn't exist?" "It's not part of county zoning," she confirmed. "Might be a third-party contractor. Happens sometimes with HOA liaisons." So Karen had fabricated a government-sounding department to lend legitimacy to her notices. And she'd either looped in or completely fooled some lower-level county clerks to accept those papers as real. Dean had already anticipated this. By the time I got back to the cabin, he'd drafted a formal injunction request and lined up a forensic document analyst who specialized in municipal fraud. I forwarded him the pink notice and the certified letter. An hour later, he called me with his voice tight and controlled. "She's using forged stamps," he said. "Official seals." "Yep. Whoever made that letter slapped a fake zoning crest on it, probably copied from a PDF online. But the pixel ratios are off. I sent it to the DA's office already." That's when I heard tires on gravel. A large white truck crept up my driveway, slowly, like it was trying not to be noticed. On the door, CWG Inspections, Hazard Removal Unit. Behind it, a second vehicle followed, this one marked with a familiar logo, Deerwood Ridge Community Oversight Committee. I walked out front, camera rolling, sidearm holstered. The first guy stepped out in a high-vis vest, clipboard, helmet, trying to look official. "Sir," he said, "we're here for a preliminary hazard assessment." I asked who sent him. "Work order came through the Community Oversight Committee," he replied. I handed him a paper. "That committee doesn't exist. That's a forged agency name. This property is private. You're trespassing. Turn around and leave." The second man, older, smug, wearing a windbreaker with the HOA logo, came forward. "Sir, with all due respect, you're standing on a non-compliant structure adjacent to a fire-prone area. We're authorized to conduct safety reviews under emergency provision AB 322. I grinned. Funny, because AB 322 was repealed last year, and I have that in writing. I pointed to the perimeter where no trespassing sign stood. "You step 1 foot further, I file criminal trespass charges and civil claims for attempted unlawful entry. Cameras are rolling. Sheriff is 10 minutes away." They hesitated. The clipboard guy glanced nervously at the windbreaker. "Fine," the HOA rep snapped, "but you're endangering this entire community." They drove off. I posted the footage online that evening. Within 24 hours, it had over 200,000 views. That night, Denise Caldwell, the journalist, called. "You've started something bigger than your cabin," she said. "I've had 5 homeowners reach out already. Similar stories. Fake notices. HOA expansion attempts." She wanted to do a full expose, not just on Deerwood Ridge, but on the entire practice of HOA overreach in rural zones. Meanwhile, the DA's office moved faster than I expected. The forged seal on the pink notice gave them probable cause to open a criminal investigation. And just as Dean was filing a formal fraud complaint against the HOA, we got word that the county clerk's internal server logs showed a user account, not public-facing, had made unauthorized edits to parcel status reports during the week I was in Arizona. Guess who the login belonged to? A guy named Scott Halperin, employed by the Office of Land Management. Married to a woman named Melissa Stanford, Karen's daughter. That's when the walls started cracking. Dean put in a subpoena request. Sheila drafted letters for potential RICO violations. And I started installing 4 more trail cams with real-time alerts, this time with cloud backups routed through 3 different servers. They'd tried to gaslight me into thinking I didn't own my land. Now I was going to prove, on paper, on video, in court that they didn't own the truth. By the time the subpoena landed on Scott Halperin's desk, I had already braced for retaliation. People like Karen didn't go down quietly, but I underestimated just how far she'd go. 2 days after the news broke that a criminal investigation was underway, I arrived at the cabin to find the front gate wide open. My trail cams had all gone dark, cut wires. One of the solar panels that powered the outer motion sensors had been shattered. The mailbox, twisted off its post, lay in the ditch with a new unmarked flyer tucked under a rock beside it. Unsafe dwelling. Do not enter. Reported for illegal occupancy. No signature, no seal, just bold red print on bright paper, clearly made to look like some kind of emergency order. Inside, the door had pry marks. The side window had been tampered with. Thankfully, they hadn't gotten in. The deadbolts held, and the alarm still blared through the emergency satellite backup, but it was obvious. This wasn't a bluff anymore. Karen, or someone working for her, had tried to break into the cabin, whether to plant something or find something illegal. I couldn't be sure. Either way, I wasn't about to wait and see what came next. I called the sheriff again. This time, it wasn't just a report. It was a formal request to launch an investigation into criminal trespass, vandalism, and attempted forced entry. They took fingerprints, documented the damage, and dusted the mailbox flyer. Then they pulled something I hadn't expected: tire casts. Turns out, one of the deputies used to work auto theft, and he noticed deep dual-groove marks in the gravel, consistent with a specific make of contractor truck. The same make Karen had used for that phony inspection team 2 days earlier. The county DA's office was moving too. With the forged seal confirmed and the subpoena into Halperin's edits leading straight back to Karen's family, they'd finally authorized search warrants. Her home, the HOA's office, and the Community Oversight Committee building, which turned out to be nothing more than a repurposed clubhouse conference room, were all raided within 72 hours. That's when the floodgates opened. Emails. So many emails. Dean got copies through Discovery. Karen had been coordinating with a small circle of HOA board members to manufacture abandonment cases, not just mine, but at least 4 others. Her plan was disturbingly structured. Identify homes unoccupied for longer than 30 days. File false neighborhood complaints to county agencies. Use family ties to insert temporary status changes in property records. Post seizure notices. Under the guise of emergency jurisdiction, push for quiet title claims if no one contested in time the most damning part. A scanned memo draft titled Phase 2, Reclaiming Ridge Perimeter Lots for Community Benefit. My cabin was listed at the top. When confronted, Halperin folded fast. He admitted Karen had promised shared ownership of future development sites. She wanted to repurpose perimeter lots as elevated lifestyle zones, whatever the hell that meant. It was textbook property theft under the veil of governance. I didn't stop there. I gave the entire trove to Denise Caldwell. Within 48 hours, her feature went live. The HOA that tried to steal a cabin. It hit like a bomb. News stations picked it up. Radio shows called. Property rights forums reposted it 100 times over. And then came the phone call I never thought I'd get. A senior investigator from the Colorado Attorney General's office reached out. They'd been monitoring irregular HOA-related complaints statewide. Karen's case and her family ties fit a growing pattern. We may be elevating this to racketeering, he said. You willing to testify if it comes to that? I told him I wouldn't miss it for the world, but it wasn't just about my land anymore. Karen had turned this into something much bigger. And when people in power try to take what isn't theirs, homes, land, lives, the law doesn't always act fast. Sometimes it takes someone like me, a stubborn bastard with good boots and better receipts, to drag it into the daylight. The courtroom looked nothing like in the movies. No soaring speeches, no slamming fists, just pale wood, fluorescent lighting, and a stiff air of formal boredom. But beneath the surface, every eye in that room was locked onto one woman, Karen Stanford, seated beside her lawyer, arms crossed like she'd been forced to attend a dull community fundraiser. The charges read like a checklist of everything she'd been playing at for months: fraudulent misrepresentation of property status, criminal conspiracy, attempted unlawful transfer of real estate, impersonation of county authority, and racketeering. Not just in my case, but 4 others they'd confirmed as part of her perimeter scheme. I sat behind the prosecution table with Dean, my attorney, and Denise from the Gazette 2 rows back with her press badge clipped proudly to her collar. Across the aisle were 3 other property owners, people I'd never met before this, now all pulled into the same war. All of us blindsided by HOA overreach, all of us victims of the same woman. The most surreal moment came when the clerk entered the notarized emergency custodial control letter Karen had submitted as evidence during her HOA filings. It had my name spelled wrong, cited a revoked county statute from the 1980s, and was signed by her dead father-in-law. Apparently, she thought no one would check the county records. They did. Her zinger came during cross-examination. When asked why she believed she had authority to take control of non-HOA land, she said, because the land was clearly unloved, and if someone won't love their land, the community should. That quote made headlines the next morning. The prosecution buried her. Between the deleted video footage recovered from my satellite logs, the forged flyers, the falsified status update on the cadastral portal, and testimony from her contractor nephew and HOA secretary, she had no room left to maneuver. The court saw the whole web for what it was, a coordinated land grab disguised as administrative duty. After 3 weeks of proceedings, the verdict came down. Guilty. On all counts. Karen was sentenced to 17 years. 10 in federal prison, 7 suspended with conditions, mainly restitution and 0 further involvement in any property-related organizations. Her nephew Halperin pled out and got 3 years probation and permanent disbarment from public office. The HOA dissolved. Its assets frozen, its board disbanded by emergency injunction, its clubhouse to be sold off to repay damages. And me? I was awarded $240,000 in restitution, covering property damage, legal fees, and emotional hardship resulting from an unlawful campaign of coercive intimidation, as the judge put it. Not that I cared about the money. What mattered was the precedent. The county commission clearly rattled, fast-tracked new protections for rural landowners. A mandatory notification system was implemented. No property could be labeled abandoned without certified contact with the listed owner. All HOAs now had to file jurisdiction maps with the county and publicly register their governance boundaries. Karen's stunt had triggered a bureaucratic awakening. 3 months later, I had the land professionally surveyed again. No changes. Still mine. Always was. I had a new fence built, taller, sharper, new cameras installed with off-site backups this time. A steel plate now covered the mailbox, and at the entrance to the drive, I mounted a new plaque, etched in brass, screwed into 3 feet of concrete, private land, not subject to HOA. Trespassers will be photographed, documented, and prosecuted. This is not a community project. Tourists sometimes stop and take pictures of it. As for the cabin, I got it formally designated as a county heritage site. Apparently, the structure dated back to the 1920s, and the original builders were part of a now-extinct mountain ranger program. Fitting, I thought. The place had always been a lookout of sorts. Denise published a follow-up piece titled "The Cabin That Stood Its Ground." My inbox flooded for weeks. Emails from landowners in Oregon, Utah, Tennessee. People who had gone through similar HOA conflicts or were fighting back right now. Some asked for advice. Some just wanted to say thanks. A few had already started local legal reform petitions. I gave a guest talk at the University of Colorado Law School. They'd made my case part of a lecture on private land rights. The students had questions. I had plenty of answers. It was strange being the guy who took on a corrupt HOA and won. But I wasn't trying to be anyone's hero. I just wanted to be left alone on my land, the way it was meant to be. No forged signs, no fake authority, no community control. Just a man, his cabin, and a line no one would ever cross again.